Okay, let's run a thought experiment. Imagine the United States just decides to annex Greenland. I mean, look at it. It's this massive, hugely strategic piece of real estate sitting right on top of the world. On paper, it seems like a brilliant move, right? A permanent American foothold in the Arctic. But what if that one tactical win triggers a complete strategic divorce, tearing apart the very alliances that give the US its power in the first place?
And no, that is not an exaggeration. The immediate fallout wouldn't be with Russia or China, it would be with America's closest friends. You see, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, a founding member of NATO. So a move like this would spark an unthinkable crisis. You'd suddenly have NATO allies talking about Article 5, the sacred an attack on one is an attack on all, but they'd be talking about it because of an action taken by the alliance's own leader. The whole foundation of Western security would start to crumble.
Now, the public justification for something so radical would, of course, be national security. You'd hear all about how the Arctic is the new frontier, a geopolitical hotspot, and how controlling Greenland is essential to protecting American interests. But does that argument actually hold water?
Well, let's just look at the history for a second. During the Cold War, the US had a huge military presence all over Greenland. We're talking multiple air bases, radar sites, more than 10,000 troops, and all of it was done with Denmark's full permission. Today, that's all been drawn down to a single, tiny base with maybe a couple hundred people. So if security were really the problem, Washington could just pick up the phone and negotiate with Copenhagen to expand its presence. The fact that this isn't happening suggests the real prize is something else entirely. Okay, so if the national security argument is just a smokescreen, what's the real game here? Why would you take such a massive political gamble, alienating your closest allies, for what most people think of as a giant island of ice? Well, the answer is about a different kind of power, a much more direct, unilateral kind of control. By taking sovereign control, the US could turn Greenland into a fortress of the North Atlantic. First, it becomes a denial tool. The US could single-handedly block Chinese investment or other activities without having to consult a single ally. Second, it makes America the gatekeeper of the crucial sea lanes between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK, the main front door to the Arctic. And finally, it would deliver the asset, exclusive guaranteed rights to Greenland's enormous untapped reserves of rare earth minerals. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. In the Arctic, just planting your flag on a piece of land doesn't mean you actually control it, not even close. Real power, real capability isn't just about physical presence. It's about sustainment, being able to actually support your forces there. And it's about legal authority. Both of those things, it turns out, depend almost entirely on the strength of your network, not just the dirt under your feet. And when you look at the basic tools you need for that physical presence, the United States, all by itself, is in a really tough spot. Let's talk icebreakers. Russia operates a fleet of around 40 of them, some of them nuclear-powered. The US has 2. Just 2. Without our allies, we are, and I'm not kidding, bringing a rowboat to a frozen ocean. But then you add in the allies. This is the great equalizer. When you bring in the fleets from NATO partners like Canada, Finland, and Sweden, the whole picture changes. Suddenly, you have this allied shield that completely closes that gap with Russia. It's the alliance, you see, that provides the real muscle in the Arctic. It's not American might alone. And that muscle isn't just about the number of ships. It's this deep, intricate web of logistics. We're talking about shared ports, interconnected data cables that are vital for communication, joint search and rescue operations, and complex supply routes that have been built up over decades. This network is the true source of Western power up there. It's what makes a sustained presence in one of the most hostile environments on Earth even possible. And annexing Greenland puts that entire network on the chopping block. And believe me, the fallout would be instant. You get a statement from a key ally like Canada's Prime Minister saying, "We stand fully behind Denmark." That's not just polite diplomatic talk. That's code for "we've chosen our side, and it isn't you." A move against Denmark would create this deep, painful crack right through the heart of the transatlantic alliance, forcing countries to choose whether to defend one member from another. And this wouldn't just be some quiet crisis happening behind closed doors. Oh no, it would explode onto the streets. You'd see tens of thousands of protesters in Copenhagen, and just as passionately in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. And their chant would be "Kalalit nu nat." That's Greenland's name in its own language. It's a powerful, defiant statement. Greenland belongs to Greenlanders. It creates this democratic wall of opposition that's just impossible for Washington to ignore.
So let's get practical for a second. Going it alone would come with staggering costs. Without that allied network, any US presence there suddenly becomes way more expensive because now you have to build up your own massive stockpiles. Everything gets slower because you're creating brand new supply chains from scratch. And maybe worst of all, it becomes far more risky. Losing that integrated search and rescue net means that when something goes wrong in that dangerous environment, you're on your own.
And this all leads to the ultimate resource trap. So, sure, the US might own the ground with all those precious rare earth minerals, but the raw ore is worthless if you can't process it. And guess who controls most of that advanced processing technology and infrastructure? The EU. A diplomatic rupture severs that critical link in the supply chain. You end up owning a very valuable hole in the ground that can't actually produce anything of strategic value.
So remember that allied shield? Remember how our friends' ships closed the gap? Well, with the alliance shattered, that shield just evaporates. Those allied ships become ghosts on the water. And suddenly, we are right back to that terrifying original math. Russia's 40 icebreakers versus America's 2. What was once a manageable gap is now a decisive, overwhelming advantage for Russia to control the Arctic seas. So you have to ask, who's the real winner in all this chaos? As a top EU diplomat would likely say, China and Russia are thoroughly enjoying the situation. And of course they are. A West that's busy fighting with itself is a dream come true for them. It gives Moscow and Beijing a golden opportunity to expand their influence, pressure critical undersea cables, and flex their muscles, knowing a coordinated NATO response is completely off the table. So when you put it all on the scales, the strategic verdict is just painfully clear. On one side, the gain, the territory of Greenland. It's a tactical prize for sure. But on the other side, the cost, the entire NATO alliance network, shattered. The United States would gain a rock, but lose the very network that gives that rock and all of its other global assets their real power. It's a tactical win that costs you a complete strategic meltdown. And what you're left with is this haunting picture of America isolated and alone in the ice. It's a powerful lesson, because in the complex world we live in, and especially in a place like the Arctic, the real currency of power isn't a flag you plant on a piece of land. It's the resilience of the networks that connect you to your allies.